Hello, welcome back to See What Sticks, a podcast associated with Hollywood Casting Film. I'm Russell.
I'm Arianna.
I'm Max.
I'm Olivia.
And I'm Vinay.
And this is definitely not our second time trying to record this episode. So, this episode is going to be all about good and bad casting decisions in TV and movies. So, because we definitely haven't tried this before, Arianna, go for it.
Okay. So my best or good in TV is Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones. She played Lyanna, I think is how it's spelled, or Lyanna. She was the one that stood up when everybody didn't want Jon Snow to be like the king of the North, and she stood up and said, Jon Snow's my king. I think that was a very adult role for her, just in a sense that she had to be the one to do that, and she looked very young. And my worst would be Pete Davidson, just because I think SNL only uses him as the escape joke in the Weekend Update, and he's not really in other stuff, so I can't really give, I guess, an accurate opinion on it. And I also haven't seen King of Staten Island, so I don't really know if he's good in anything else.
Pete Davidson looks like if my mustache and my haircut became a person. So I'm not exactly a fan of his look. And yeah, I agree with the Pete Davidson thing 100%. Like, I'm sure he's funny, but it never works for me. Like, it never hits. It's always like, I see what you're doing, but it's not making me laugh. Like, There's so many other funny things they do where I'm like,
Yeah, and like, you don't know if it's the writing either.
Yeah, it could just be the bit.
Yeah.
But this is like totally a thing, like a shallow thing, but like, I think his bit is that he has tattoos, and it's like, oh, look, I'm like this edgy counterculture person on SNL, but I'm like, tattoos aren't that hard to get, man. That's not a personality. Like, it's like, that's cool you went through that, and that probably costs a lot of money, but that doesn't make you funny.
Right. It seems like SNL does this every 9 or 10 years. Like, they had Robert Downey Jr. on for a year, I think, for the same reason, just to make the show a little more hip or a little edgier. But they weren't really traditional comics, and they didn't have those. Even though he's funny in movies, it didn't work on SNL.
Yeah, definitely. And on SNL, I've heard, I mean, this may be false, it may be true. Apparently, SNL alum Chevy Chase is the meanest person in Hollywood, which I find hilarious. Right. So I always find that funny. Someone who's funny on TV is just a monster in real life. That always makes me laugh. But we talked about this, definitely not on our first trying to record this, but a lot of you haven't seen Game of Thrones, which is just, how did you talk to people for like 7 years?
I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Quietly walk away from the water cooler whenever that started up.
Yeah, someone just says like Westeros, and you're like, I'm out. Okay, I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I'm the kid that got the Cliff's Notes to Lord of the Rings, to avoid the summer reading. I don't know. I could never do that type of fiction for some reason. It never connected.
Yeah. High fantasy isn't for everyone. I get why people don't like it, because you get into there and there's all these names and you're like, nope, next.
Right.
Are you a Star Wars person though, Vinay?
I love Star Wars. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, that's a great question. I don't know why I love Star Wars and I don't like Game of Thrones. And I don't like the new Star Wars movies either. So maybe it's CGI related to some extent. I don't know. That's half of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll never ask anyone on here to date themselves, but I'm sure you remember seeing the original Star Wars in a different capacity than probably I remember watching the original Star Wars.
That's a nice way of putting it, Russell.
Yeah. I remember watching them on VHS, so does that count? Kind of?
No, I do remember, the HBO box on top of the TV and it coming on like every third day. So, yep.
Yep. Okay. So, after Olivia, who wants to go with their picks?
So Olivia's next, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I thought like the worst performance of like a movie is Mickey Rooney at Breakfast at Tiffany's. I mean, I don't know if I want to say it's because of like its caricature or anything like that, or I also think it's just like plain just bad acting and bad casting because you know he's white being Asian, and then on and then on that note, I didn't think of anything with like TV, but the next one that I thought of just with that is Tilda Swinton with Doctor Strange. And the one thing that was interesting with that is they were trying to be like push the envelope. We have a woman instead of a man being in that role because traditionally it's an Asian man in the comics. Mm-hmm. And I mean, she did okay with the part, but also it's just weird that you know you were trying to be progressive, but like not too progressive.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like you're so close. Like,
yeah,
you almost did what you guys wanted to do, but you completely missed the mark. So I do understand that. I think, yeah, who's a really good one? Do you have one of those?
Yes. So I have a couple. Michael B. Jordan, I thought in Black Panther as Killmonger, I thought he killed it. Especially because like he adds that kind of nuance to the role about like how like Killmonger is like technically, you know, his thought patterns like about social justice is right, but you know, I feel like murdering a bunch of people is not necessarily like the best route to go.
Yeah.
And then what was the other one? Oh, and then I thought Charlize Theron in Monster.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I would have expected that from her, especially like her previous roles were not as serious as that. But she gained a lot of weight for it too, and she just like killed it. That movie, I didn't know what I was getting into when I saw that movie because I was just like, yeah, Charlize Theron, yeah, like I'm ready for it. And then I watched it and I was like, all right, I need to watch like kids shows for like 2 days. Leave me alone in my room. I can't, because that's sad.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are really good picks. Those are like good picks, but not like traditional picks that I would have thought. Because I had like ones that I thought like, is anyone gonna pick these, or are these ones too obvious? Like bad castings are really good ones. So that's really interesting. And yeah, that's a tough movie to watch. How old were you when you saw that?
I was in my teens because I want to say I was like 17 or something like that. I started like just watching a bunch of movies that were like, you have to watch these or you don't know movies and all that stuff. And I was like, all right, well, let's go for it. I think now I'm more like, all right, I'm actually going to see if I want to watch this movie before I subject myself to like this entire list.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of those movies that's fallen into the category of I watched it in film school, so I can't watch it again without having flashbacks. So I haven't rewatched it. There's like 15 movies like that. I'm like, this is good, but I probably won't rewatch it until like someone like asks me to rewatch it with them, or I'm forced to for some reason.
Requiem for a Dream is like that for me.
I'm never rewatching that movie. It's cool, but I'm never rewatching it.
No.
That movie was like, you remember when duct tape was like a personality trait? It's like that. It's like saying I like Requiem for a Dream. It's like, that's cool, dude. A lot of people do. It's very famous. So yeah. So is Max next?
Sure. My good role, my good performance I picked was James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano. I was watching an interview with Bryan Cranston. He was talking about Breaking Bad, and he talked about how without Tony Soprano there would be no Walter White, there would be no Dexter. So it's become one of those iconic roles that kind of kickstarted this anti-hero main character thing where he's really not a good person, but you can't help but root for him. You know what I mean?
Right. Hey, Max, have you heard of a book called Difficult Men that was written 10 years ago? It's an awesome book. It's about The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Oz, all the anti-hero shows that came out like in the early 2000s, and Mad Men. And he goes through and interviews all of the showrunners and ties them all together to express how they collectively changed TV. It's an awesome read.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And then my bad performance, I had to pick Hayden Christensen as Anakin. I love Star Wars, and it's to the point where, you know, I'm not totally deep into it, but I'll take anything in Star Wars. You know, a lot of people don't like the new ones, but I'm just kind of eating it all up because it's Star Wars.
Right.
But his acting kind of ruins it for me. It very, you know, the suspension of disbelief where you get sucked into the movie.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that totally takes me out, and it just ruins the whole thing.
I was this close to picking that one too. This close, but I was like, somebody else has got to, and I got to step back on that one.
I will actually say that Jake Lloyd, the little kid Anakin, might be worse though.
It was either him. It was either him or Hayden Christensen. It was a flip. It was a flip.
See, Jake Lloyd also is like in jail now or something. Like there's like a whole thing about him. He has fallen off the wagon in a Macaulay Culkin kind of way, and it's interesting because maybe it isn't the actors, maybe it's the movie that has broken them, because both those two different versions of Anakin, not good. Just
yeah.
And they like stopped acting afterwards and everything.
And I kind of hold child actors in a different category. Like for me, like when a child actor is really good, that's when I think a movie is really good, like The Sixth Sense kind of thing, where they act like they're older, they have more experience than they should. And so as bad as Jake Lloyd is, he's also like a 6-year-old. So
yeah.
That's true, but then like you watch a movie like Jojo Rabbit or any of Wes Anderson's movies, and he will cast kids, and those kids are so good. So I think it's probably also up to the child actor to some extent, where I think it's a fit with the director and the child actor. Like if the director and the kid get along on a certain level, that would be like, oh, okay, this totally makes sense. But I think with George Lucas, he's just such a nut. And like with the kid, he's probably just talking to the kid about midichlorians, and the kid's like, what the hell is going on? Just like, no. And I think that's part of the problem. And then it's also just a CGI nightmare, because I'm sure that kid had to like act against a ping pong ball on a stick for like 6 months. And that would break me as like an adult. I'd be like, I can't. I'm going to lose my mind.
Right.
Have you all seen, I think I dropped it in one of the group chats, the Christian Bale losing his mind on set of Terminator, where he just he just loses it. I feel like that's how it is when you're in just a CGI movie like that. It breaks you.
Right.
Yeah. Like it like questions how like the little kid who did the Jungle Book, like how he was just, like walking around the whole film with just like a stick.
Yeah, a stick and Jon Favreau yelling at him. So it's probably a great work environment. Because Disney's not super strict about what they do. But
I heard a story about Sir Ian McKellen like breaking down in tears during The Hobbit because they had filmed just like one person, then took them out, then green screen, and one person, and they weren't acting on each other. They were acting with themselves.
Yeah.
And he was just like, this isn't what I signed up for when I acted.
Yeah. And that's like versus like the original Lord of the Rings films, which I'll talk about again because I think it's like I need to talk about them on every podcast. But those films, they just lived out in New Zealand for 6 months and they made them like go hunt deer. So I mean, like the difference is crazy when they knew like, oh, we're gonna get $1 billion from New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers, so we don't need to make our actors go like live in the mountains. But I think when you do that, or like The Revenant, it turns out to be a better movie. Because they're not actually acting anymore. They're just being people on camera.
Mm-hmm. Right. Max, I'm curious, as a Sopranos fan, do you have a scene or a moment with Gandolfini that sticks out to you as probably his best episode or performance?
Well, yeah. One of my favorite episodes, I don't really want to spoil much of the plot.
Right.
But one of his friends has died, and he's kind of struggling with his death, because he's responsible for it. And in the episode, he gets food poisoning, and so he's hallucinating throughout the whole episode that his friend is still alive, or like there's a scene where he thinks he's a fish, and yeah, I guess that's probably one of my favorite episodes with him. But
Right.
he also has this ability, like people can have the glare, or they can have like that, I know that look that what he gets is it looks like he's just going to rip your head off. Like he looks like an angry gorilla, where
Yeah.
he has zero care whatsoever about what's going to happen to you. So
Right.
I think that was one of his main talents. But then he could also turn that off and be charming, be funny, and he was one of those actors that was gone too soon. That who knows the potential that he had.
Yeah. That thing you said earlier, that without Sopranos there'd be no Breaking Bad, that's so true. And when I was reading that book I mentioned earlier, it talks about an episode in The Sopranos called College. I think it's the fifth or sixth one, where he takes his daughter to school. And
That's one of my favorites too.
But apparently they were so nervous about putting that on the air because the hero had never you never seen a hero murder somebody before unless it was justified, and this clearly wasn't justified.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we take it for granted now when we watch episodes like that they had to break new ground at some point, and apparently they point to that episode as like this turning point when you could start to break the rules with your protagonist.
Yeah, I think so. And that kind of spoils what one of my picks is. I guess we'll go to that. So I want to know what your all opinion is on my bad pick, not my good one. My bad pick is Kate Capshaw in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I think that is one of the most off-putting performances in any movie. And as I love Indiana Jones.
Wasn't she dating the director? Is that?
She was dating. She was married to Steven Spielberg.
I thought so.
And that movie, love it or hate it, I actually like Temple of Doom. It's not my favorite Indiana Jones, but I do like Temple of Doom. But Kate Capshaw in the entire movie is just crying and screaming, and it's like, I get it. If you're in that situation in real life, you'd probably be freaking out. But she's like both overacting and underacting this at the same time. And it just like, you can't watch it without being like, what? Like, why did you cast this person? And when you figure it out, you're like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it, but still, like, it's this like weird sore spot in your memory of the film. It's like when you have a positive memory, but you also have a broken arm. So you're like, oh, that would have been fun if I didn't have a broken arm. So that's her performance in that movie. And I think that, and then another one that is a bad performance but a good casting is in Harry Potter. I think Rupert Grint in the first two movies, Ron, is so bad. But then he gets better. Like the first two movies, Ron is not good. He's just a sad little man who is just vomiting slugs and being scared of spiders. And it's just like, dude, like, what in the book you're not like this. Why are you doing this? And then he gets good. After the third one, he becomes like a legitimate character. But yeah, the first two, Ron Weasley it's rough.
I think his facial expressions saved him a little bit because like in his scenes like that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and like he's a cute little kid, and that also saves it because it's like, oh, they're a bunch of kids acting against each other, so like I'll give it a break. But if you like watch the last two Harry Potter films and then you go back and watch the first ones, you're like, Daniel Radcliffe is quite good all the time. Emma Watson is quite good all the time. And then Rupert Grint, like, dude, you needed some acting help there, buddy. Like, you took a big step up between 2 and 3. And then the Harry Potter Fights a Dragon one, he's actually quite good in that. So he's pretty standout in Harry Potter and the Dragon. Which Vinay doesn't like dragons, so I'm sorry.
That just makes me think of that Dumbledore switch, though, Richard Harris between Michael Gambon. And I still maintain that Richard Harris was like the better of the two Dumbledores in the first two movies. And then Michael Gambon, I like feel like I know that he could act it, but there has to be a way that someone directed him to act like that, because he is a good actor in general.
He's just a sad old man who's wearing pajamas and angry at Harry Potter for no reason. And it's like, dude, you're supposed to be his mentor. You're the only person who like loves this guy like unconditionally. And he's just like, whatever, Harry, I don't believe you. It's like, you know what's going to happen. Why aren't you nice? I've just always thought that. I'm like, why is Dumbledore such an asshole the whole time?
Well, there's a huge tone shift after the second one. It gets so dark, and then they switch Dumbledores, and I think that kind of gets sucked up into that.
Yeah, I think it does. I remember so vividly the trailer for the third one, and there's that scene where they're doing the choir thing with the owls. It's in the trailer, and that's so much darker than like anything else. And it's even like that sequence is so surreal and dark, even going up to the next two, that I'm like, why did they put that in the trailer? It just tonally is so weird and off. But I do like those movies.
Yeah. Well, Alfonso Cuarón is kind of a little bit darker in his style, and that was really he did the third one, so that's why it was all changed. That's why they wore regular clothes.
Yeah.
He wanted it like that, and then they went back to wearing their uniform in the fourth one.
Yeah. Vinay, have you seen Harry Potter or no?
Nope. Yes.
Come on.
No, that one I'm going to get sad about. Like,
Category.
he's like, dragons, magic, out.
Yeah.
I think we, as a studio, should throw like a fake watch party for one of our films and just show Vinay Harry Potter and be like, got it. Got him to watch
That's
it.
only like, what, 27 hours? You could just do it straight through? You're fine?
Yeah.
I've done it before.
Yeah.
Have you actually?
Yeah, I did like a whole Harry Potter. Like I cooked all the meals from like Harry Potter, like pumpkin pasties. I did little drinks with it too, like a love potion. I did the Felix Felicis too, like little cute drinks with it. And then I just watched all of them.
Yeah.
That's impressive. I have friends who did that in college, and I'm like, that's cool, but I have to break up the Harry Potter films. I can do them like 2 and then like skip a day, then 2, then skip a day. But all those Harry Potters, they just get, after like the 5th one, Vinay's like, God, I don't know what I'm talking about. But after the 5th one, it's just like a sad lizard man hunting a boy, and it's so much.
You gotta make it.
This guy.
You gotta make it fun though. You can't make it like a sit down, like watch it. It has to be like, you're also doing like Harry Potter games or like, also doing drinking games or something like that. Because if you sit through that, that's a lot. But like at this point, I've watched it so many times that if I, do something else while I'm watching it, it's not as big of a deal.
For sure.
I'm also big on like watching movies and then making the recipes within them. Like I've made beignets, like the Princess and the Frog version of them. I'm trying to think of what else I've done. I did, if you guys have seen Aristocats, they have creme de la creme de Edgar. All that fun stuff.
Have you ever watched Binging with Babish on YouTube, the cooking guy? He does.
I love him.
He only cooks stuff from movies and TV shows, and he shows you how to make like what it would be like in the show. It's quite interesting. I have no idea how to bake. I like cooking. Don't know how baking works. It's science, and it's not for me. It's like math, so I can like put stuff in a pan and just keep cooking it until it may taste good. But yeah. And then my good pick, which unfortunately Vinay and Max have ruined, is Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad. The beginning of the first show, so my dad is a doctor, and my dad also wears like green button-down shirts with ties with the short sleeves, and a lot of the mannerisms Bryan Cranston has when he's like dealing with his family, and just like how he acts, just like towards his family and how he speaks to them. And like, cause he's like a good dad and stuff. Hey dad, thanks for listening. But it's one of those things that it reminds me a lot of him. And then as he turns like into the Heisenberg kind of persona, I've always thought of my dad is 2 steps away from this the whole time. Like I could see my dad doing this. And then I'm like, my dad will get home late from like work. I'm like, what were you doing? Were you dissolving a body? And it's like, because Bryan Cranston's so good with like math and science and stuff. And my dad, when I was a kid, always helped me with science fair projects and went way over the top. He's like, Russell, it's like this. And I'm like, hold up, it's okay. I'm 11. But I think that performance is so good. And it's one of those roles that every scene he's in, he steals. I know Aaron Paul is also really good, but Bryan Cranston is just one of those characters, even up until the end, which I won't spoil the end of Breaking Bad. You just feel so bad for this guy. Like,
one of my favorite scenes in television, it doesn't have Bryan Cranston, but it's Breaking Bad. It's the scene where the brother-in-law, is it Hank, I think is his name?
Yeah.
Hank talking to Bryan Cranston's wife, and he's, the cat's out of the bag. They've just discovered that Walter's dealing drugs, and he's telling the wife that, you need to testify against your husband. And he doesn't get it. When he's talking to her, he doesn't understand that she's complicit. And he's telling her, you need to do this, you need to do that. And that scene is so well written and well acted because the wife keeps saying, am I under arrest? And every time she says, am I under arrest, her timbre changes and it means something different. Mm-hmm. And I've always marveled at the writing and the acting in that scene. I've always thought it was great.
Oh, yeah, I agree. That is one of the best scenes in TV, that one. And then I think one of the other really standout moments in that show for Bryan Cranston, and I think really makes you reevaluate this character, is when Aaron Paul and Kristen Ritter, who's like his girlfriend for a little bit, she has the overdose and he lets her die. Like, he watches it. I think that scene is so good because there's like no dialogue in it, and you can see everything that Bryan Cranston is thinking. Like, all this is happening, he's like processing it and he lets it happen. Where I think that character, he's battling with himself. Like, what do I do? Like, do I do the selfish thing? Do I do the righteous thing? And he picks what he picks. And I think through the rest of the show, if you're watching it, like kind of binge watching it, you have that in the back of your head. You're like, you just let an innocent person die. It's like, do you even know who you are? And I think that shows the definition of the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
And it's one of those shows that I know we talked about The Sopranos. It's so good. And the best is, I read a Reddit article, which is always a dangerous hole to go down, but it's about how Bryan Cranston's character in the show Malcolm in the Middle is the same character as his character in Breaking Bad. And there's like all this stuff. It's so funny when you read it. It's just like he just got unhinged. But it's a really funny thing to read because he still plays that dad character, but so opposite. And I think that's my really good cast. That's kind of made his career what it is.
Right.
But Vinay, what are yours?
Well, I'm going to cheat a little. My good example is the entire cast of The West Wing.
Okay.
And it's somewhat predictable because I've mentioned The West Wing before on this podcast. But that was the show when I think first really got excited about this new era of TV. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching, I guess it must be about 16, 17 years ago, for the very first time an episode. And, it's Aaron Sorkin. The writing's always brilliant. But there was a particular episode I watched where I couldn't believe the dialogue I was listening to. And I pulled it up before the podcast. But it's basically President Bartlett saying, words, when spoken out loud for the sake of performance, are music. They have rhythm and pitch and timbre and volume. These are the properties of music. And music has the ability to find us and move us and lift us up in the ways that literal meaning can't. And to me, it was like I was watching a play on TV. And I'd never seen that style of writing. I'd never seen a show reach for that kind of idealistic tone. And I think most impressively, I've never seen anyone take something as abstract as patriotism and make it kind of sexy. And for all reasons, I felt like that's probably my favorite show ever made on TV for those reasons. Because to me, it was the degree of difficulty was so high, and they pulled it off.
That's actually my dad's favorite show. He has this running bit where he will never watch the last season.
Right.
Until he is on his deathbed. He doesn't want to know how it ends, and he will not watch the last season until it's the end for him. So like we have it on like Blu-ray and stuff, and it's still in its packaging. He's like, I'm not going to open it, and I'm like, and I got it for him like as a gift, like when it ended. And he's like, thank you so much. He's like, now I'll know where it is when I need to watch it. And I'm like, I think that's really funny for someone who loves the show that much. and like writing. I think with that show, it's kind of like the reverse version of House of Cards, where House of Cards tries to be West Wing, but it just can't.
Yeah. Oh, House of Cards is cynical West Wing.
Yeah, it is cynical West Wing. And what's your bad pick?
The bad pick, unfortunately, I like this actor, but I don't know if you guys watch the show Billions. My bad pick is John Malkovich as the Russian. I felt like, they're like, we're bringing in a heavy hitter at season 4, and it was publicity, but it's the kind of character that should have only been written as a caricature, maybe been in 3 scenes. And as good of an actor as he is, it just feels like a cartoon the whole time I'm watching. And I could never get behind that performance. Although I love the show, it's just it was very distracting. Like Max mentioned earlier, it took me out of every scene. So my bad pick. And the honorable mention is very similar reasoning. If you guys watched the show 24 15 years ago, Janine Garofalo as a late season entrant was equally bad, I have to say.
She came in after they blew up Los Angeles, right? She was post that season.
I think it's been a while. Yeah. It was another distracting performance for me.
I loved that show when it was on. Like, that show blew my mind when it was first on. I remember I definitely watched that show way too young, but my mom and dad loved it. And they're like, Russell, you should come watch 24. And I didn't get it as a kid. But the older I get, I've rewatched a bunch of it. I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, this is next level, like, so creative. And they stick to the whole it's only an hour each time so well. Like, there's episodes where people are just driving. Nothing's happening to them. They're just in a car. And I love that because all other shows, and I think Game of Thrones becomes a big victim of it in the later seasons where people, like, teleport around the map. Where it'll be one scene and someone's in, like, the continent 5,000 miles away, and then the next scene they're there. In previous seasons, it would take them a whole season to get to that next location. But you could tell it just either was lazy writing or lazy filmmaking, where it's just like, okay, now they're there. And it's like that it takes away a lot of the tension from the scenes. And that's something that West Wing had a lot of, is like tension in a scene where there's no real action scenes in West Wing, but there's so much tension, like you just can't look away because everything everyone's saying is like perfectly orchestrated, but also sounds so real.
Yeah. Well, the point you made about your dad, and I wonder if he feels this way after season 4, Sorkin left, and then it's just all random writers, and that's when a lot of people stop watching.
Yeah.
And admittedly, season 5 is a train wreck. But the last 2 seasons, 6 and 7, are actually great for completely different reasons than seasons 1 through 4. Seasons 1 through 4 is just like, it's poetry. And seasons 6 and 7, it's like a great, what do you call those? Procedural?
Yeah.
You get to learn a lot about government and about how campaigns work. And it's totally good for almost for a plot reason, not a stylistic reason. So
I think so. I agree. I think that show, it reminds me a lot of Seinfeld when Larry David left. As soon as Larry David left Seinfeld, there's like gem episodes that are like, okay, this is hilarious. But in general, it just lost that thing about it that made it what it is. Like,
it got a little wackier and less wittier, I would say.
And it's the same with The Simpsons after season 9. It's like they forgot what makes The Simpsons The Simpsons, and that's my favorite TV show of all time. And I know people are like, what? And I'm like, I love The Simpsons. I think it is one of the best shows ever created because it takes something ridiculous and makes it so believable that like this family of idiots just like Mr. Magoo's their way through life, and it's great. And I think it's one of those things where even the new seasons, I've watched a couple episodes here and there, you know what, they're fine, but it's like that. When you go and watch a new one, you're like, okay, and then you go watch something from season 5, you're like, oh, wow. Like, and there's a lot of like dated references, like the Mayor Quimby thing being a really bad JFK impression. I don't know if people now watching that get a lot of of those like jokes and like the humor. But it's one of those cartoons. Unlike, I don't like South Park. I don't. I don't really like Family Guy. But I think The Simpsons has aged very gracefully as well, and it's retrospectively very good. Like, there's not anything in there that's like, ooh, I don't think you can get away with that today. The Simpsons has always been like good, but it hasn't been like edgy for the sake of edgy.
Right.
And I think a lot of these shows and things we're watching now, I think that's why we like them, because they've always been good, and it'll, I think, continue to stay good. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just good writing, and it doesn't date itself.
Well, I think a lot of the animated series, and like Family Guy's funny, a lot of them are funny, but The Simpsons uses almost like vaudevillian humor. Yeah. Homer saying a gime, a gime, what's a gime? And then he sees a gym and he's like, oh, a gime. Yeah. Other animated shows aren't written that way. You know?
That, and then one of the best things in Simpsons, the thing that always makes me laugh so hard, is the monorail episode, which I think people kind of say is the best episode, where Homer is he's trying to stop the monorail, and he's looking for an anchor, and he looks at Bart, and Bart turns into an anchor. He's like, think harder, Homer. And it's like, that little moment is so good. And it boils down what The Simpsons is to its like core essence. It's just like, think harder, idiot. But yeah. But my internet has become unstable, so I think we should wrap up before it ends the call on us. And we also have to do this. So, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Thank you for listening. And also, Being John Malkovich is now on Netflix. So, here's something to watch.
Right.
Yeah, that got uploaded today or yesterday. So, but thank you, and we will catch you next week.
All right. Bye, guys. Enjoy your vacation.
Oh, thank you.